What's up, gamers? How you doing? In this video, I want to talk about Goldeneye 007. Recently came out for the Nintendo Switch and Xbox consoles. Super excited about it. In this video, I want to dive in and show you a visual comparison between 4 different versions of the game. Right? I'm going to show you, of course, the Switch version. I'll show you the Xbox port. I'm going to show you the original N64 game capture, and then I'm going to also show you an emulation version of the game as well. There's pros and cons to each port. Believe it or not, they are not all identical. Even the most recent, the Switch and Xbox, there are some significant differences between the two. I'm going to dive more into that as well. A brief history about the game itself. Came out in '97 for the N64. It's considered one of my favorite games of all time. It is, in my opinion, the best video game based on a movie of all time. It really was a first-person shooter to really set the standard for multiplayer. Granted, it wasn't online multiplayer. That was really Halo that did that. But this is one that you could play up to 4-player local multiplayer. And it's such a fun system game to play, even today. Granted, the controls have not aged well because you only had one analog stick for the N64. But with the new Xbox port, the controls have been updated and mapped. So if you're used to playing most modern day first-person shooters, they've updated it so it does play a little easier on the Xbox. To play the new Switch version, you can use your Joy-Cons, not a problem. But I recommend getting one of these. This is a Brawler 64 controller, available through Retro Fighters. I did a video on this recently. It's a reimagined version of the N64 controller, which is this right here, of course. I'm a fan of the original N64 controller. It's really the one that kind of set the standard for analog sticks, which is great. But this one's got a nice rubber analog stick, more modern feel. It feels like if it were to take like an Xbox controller and marry it with an N64 controller, this would be their child, so to speak. It's run off Bluetooth. It connects super easy to the Switch, and really the best way to play the N64 games online. Now, to access the game for the Switch port of Goldeneye 007, you need the expansion pack or the expansion for Switch Online. It's $50 annually. I think it's definitely worth it. There's other N64 games on there that are great as well, and they're releasing more and more. The Switch port is the only one you can actually play online with friends. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second as well later in the video. There is a catch to that though. There is no grouping. It doesn't take, you have to play with your friends, right? So there's no auto grouping or anything like that. You can't like create rooms and things like that, which is kind of unfortunate. But if you have friends that are online and they also have the game, you can play online with them. You cannot do that through the Xbox port. Also, something important to note with this particular port of Goldeneye 007, this game has been in development for a while, and they've been wanting to, and I say Rare has been really wanting to release this game for years, right? In 2010, there was a Goldeneye 007 released for the Wii, PS3, Xbox 360. That was Activision that ported that. Updated graphics. You play as Daniel Craig instead of the original James Bond in 007. And it wasn't as well received. You know, they were trying to milk it. There's been a really a licensing nightmare, so to speak, right? Because you had Nintendo, which was the original platform. You had Rare, which is now owned by Microsoft. You, of course, have that headbutting. And then you also have MGM, who owns the license for 007, which is currently owned by Amazon. So they've obviously worked something out. So now we can see on both platforms. It's one of those unusual games that you can play on both the Switch online as well as you can play on Xbox, right? And to play on the Xbox, you need a Game Pass. You can play it through the cloud gaming, of course, or you can also download it. It doesn't take very much memory. It's a quick download. So I definitely recommend that. But without any further ado, let's check out some gameplay, and then I'm going to share my final opinion on what port I like the best at the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Also, real briefly, I want to show you how to play online with your friends. So open up the N64, go to the game. There's a setting on the left-hand side. Play online. You got to make sure, I don't have any friends currently online, so you got to kind of coordinate with your friends and make sure they're online at the same time you're on, and you also have the game, and then you can invite them and play together. You cannot play with random strangers. Okay, so that kind of shows you different comparisons between the 4 different ports. You can kind of see there are some differences. Now, obviously, with the N64 version, it's not HD necessarily, or definitely is not HD, and it's a little bit darker than the other 3 ports, right? So it's a little bit harder to play in that sense, but it's the original, and that's kind of what I give credit for. It's the original, and now when I was capturing the footage, unfortunately, the audio wouldn't capture for some reason on my capture device, so I couldn't really show you the audio. I've not noticed a huge audio difference between the original N64 and the 2 newer ports for the Switch and Xbox. People have complained about some of the audio sound effects not quite working right. Some people have complained about there being like lines, tears, and stuff like that in some of the graphics. I've not really noticed anything noticeable, right? When it comes to the emulation, I'll tell you the benefit of the emulation is you can obviously add very cool borders to it. It runs at about roughly around 50 frames per second or higher when you're playing the game, which is higher than what the original was at 30 frames per second, right? So there you have that. If you notice the intro when James Bond's walking in, it's done a little bit sped up, slightly fast, but the gameplay itself doesn't play fast. It actually plays pretty smooth, and you can play it using really an Xbox controller. You can use a PC controller like this will also work on the PC, the Brawler 64. You can use this, of course. So there's different options. That's definitely one to check out. The only port that will play at higher frame rates, both the Switch and Xbox ports are locked at 30 frames per second, which is kind of a letdown. Now, when it comes to the Switch port, I'll tell you the benefit. I like the fact that you can play online, but as I mentioned before in the beginning of the video, there's a huge caveat to that. You can play online when your friends are online and they have the game. My favorite port is probably the Xbox port of Goldeneye 007. Reasons being is it's stretched out to 16:9 ratio, which is nice, so you don't have the borders. So it does stretch out the graphics slightly, you'll notice. But it does have the updated HD, which also the Switch has. But the controls are so much better because you have the 2 analog controls. It's so much easier and smoother. I'm not sure if you noticed, but there's a point in level 1 where you have to shoot the lock off the gate. And it took me a while to use the C buttons and to line it up, whereas the Xbox, I used my right thumb and I was able to line it up really easy, and it took seconds. So much more easy if you're used to more modern play of first-person shooters, which most of us are. That's definitely the port to check out. The only thing that's a downside about the Xbox port, of course, is the fact that you cannot play online. It's not an option. The Switch port is definitely more true to the original N64 version of the game, right? So basically, you have the C buttons, your right analog on your Joy-Con will work as like the C buttons, so it's kind of more, more, I don't know, not as smooth as just normally using analog stick, right? And aspect ratio is true as well to the N64, so Switch is definitely more true to the original if you prefer that. The Xbox port is definitely more upgraded for those modern gamers, so to speak. Either way, if you've not played Goldeneye 007, I encourage you guys to check it out. I did a post on my Game On Expo social media, which is an event I run. And I was talking about this game, and I had someone commented, and like they never even heard of it. And I was kind of shocked. I'm like, yeah, first off, that makes me feel old. But second off, they're seriously missing on a great game. So if you haven't played Goldeneye 007, I encourage you guys to check it out, either for the Switch or Xbox, or even Emulation, or even the original one if you have it, N64. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for subscribing. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what port you prefer in the comment section. We'll see you guys soon. Take care. And of course, game on.